I think I kind of found my place now. I really like, but I did live a super stressful life. Like I didn't say no to anything, and I just toured all the time, and that made me a better bass player. But I do prefer what I'm doing now.
I had such a great time connecting with today's guest. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations, and we are chatting today with Kenneth Knudsen, who is a Danish double bassist, jazz bassist, and composer. He's had such a fascinating career, and he just released a new album called TÉTÉ with his quintet. It's an awesome album. I totally love listening to it and chatting with him, and we dig into so many great topics like Kenneth's backstory, touring life, staying healthy on the road, practice routines. He's got a great 1-hour routine, and he's also got a great approach to practicing when there is no bass. I love thinking about things like that, and we dig into all sorts of interesting territory. Kenneth actually grew up near Aalborg, Denmark, and he teaches at the conservatory there. So we talk about that, what he gets into with his students in terms of lessons, materials, super great deep dive into all things bass, music, life lessons. You'll love it. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, D'Addario Strings, Upton Bass, A440, Colstein Music, the Bass Violin Shop, and Steve Swan String Bass. Thank you so much for supporting the show, and let's dig into this conversation with today's guest, Kenneth Knudsen. Hey!
Hey, Jason.
How's it going, Kenneth? How are you?
Good. It's good. It's nice here in Denmark. It's very cold here, though.
I was looking up the temperature. Yeah, it's below freezing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Well, I won't rub it in. I live in San Francisco, so it's not freezing here. Never been freezing here.
No, it must be nice.
It's yeah, but it has been years since I've been to Denmark. You know, I went to Copenhagen a bunch of years ago and played a couple concerts, but I'm long overdue for a trip back there.
Yeah. Well, where did you play?
Well, where the heck did I play? It was so many years ago. I was playing in an orchestra, so I remember touring Tivoli. You know, like everybody. I think, is there a concert hall there too? Maybe we played at Tivoli.
Yes, there's a concert hall inside of Tivoli.
Yeah, so we definitely played there, and maybe one other spot. But this was like back in the early 2000s. So it's been
All right.
quite some time. You ever make it out to this part of the world? You've done any U.S. touring or California touring?
Not California, only New York a
New
couple
York?
of times.
Okay.
I went back and forth during my studies, and then I played concerts there as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Great. Yeah, I was looking up on Facebook. I see we have a lot of people we know in common, like Marco Panascia. You know Marco?
I studied with him in New York.
Get out of here. Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was allowed to take my lessons with whoever I wanted on my masters, and I chose Marco and Jay Anderson in New York. So I went to Marco's apartment. He lives, I don't know if you saw his apartment, but he lives on Manhattan on the 45th floor or something. It was just amazing for me coming from small town in Denmark and going to New York for the first time and visiting up there. It's great.
It is great. No, it's a great scene. I actually interviewed Marco back in the fall. I went to New York City for a week and just scheduled on a whole bunch of interviews and went to his place. And yeah, it's right by Times Square. And I love how Marco, very European, you know, walks his bass everywhere. He usually doesn't even take the train in New York. He's like just walking up and down Manhattan playing gigs.
Yeah, he's great. He's such a nice guy, and he's an amazing bass player.
For sure. So when did that? Was that when you? Well, actually, let's go to the let's go back a little earlier. Like, so did you grow up in? Is it Aalborg? Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, well, it's Danish. It's called Aalborg, but
Aalborg. Okay,
that you don't have.
I'll work on it.
I did grow up here. I grew up in a small city in the woods. But Aalborg was like the main city in my area. So I've always been here, and I did my studies here, and then I went abroad, spent a lot of time in New York, and then I moved to Berlin. And then I was in Copenhagen, and now I'm back in Aalborg because they offered me a position here.
So you're at the conservatory, right? Are you teaching there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Wow. And I was looking on the map. Yeah. So it's my geography of that part of the world's not great, but like you're kind of not too far from Gothenburg, right? Like by plane at least, it looks like.
By plane is 30 minutes.
Okay.
And the boats and stuff. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And that seems like I was looking at didn't Aalborg make a list of top places to visit in the world or something like that? Was I seeing that?
That that was so crazy. We were like number 8 on the New York Times recommended places to visit. It's a small city. It's 200,000 people. It's nothing, and then we still made that list. So that's gonna be super interesting to see what's gonna happen.
For sure. For sure. Like when did the bass come into your life? How just tell me the story of how that happened.
Well, my mom played piano when I was a kid, and music always been interesting. And I tried out different instruments when I was little. So I started on drums, and then saxophone, and then, as it happens to a lot of other kids, I guess I was just offered the bass in the music class in school.
Hmm.
They needed a bass player, and I tried it out, and I really liked it. Like I could see myself in that role, like behind the band, but also kind of controlling the music and taking care of the harmony. And that, I think that interest really kept with me as I learned how to play. So I always really liked the role of the bass player. But I do think that most kids, whatever instrument they get, they can become a master of it. It's just a matter of practice. But I was just super lucky that I actually liked the role of my instrument. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. It's an interesting role, the bass player role, because yeah, just like you're saying, you are in control in so many ways, but it is that supportive role too. I think the type of people that end up playing bass tend to have that sort of supportive personality. But yeah, you are, especially in the jazz context, you are really driving that band.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, sometimes, of course, I miss like the saxophone players and the guitar players, all that expression they and leading the band up front. It's interesting, but I think there's so much more power in bass, and the way we can shape the music is something that I really dig, and I'm always trying to find new ways to how to move my band without saying any words, for example, or just taking control on stage. That's why I play bass.
I hear you. Yeah, and it's interesting to think about all those different ways in which you can take control. I got a good friend named Danny Zeman here in the States, and we've been talking a lot. I actually just interviewed him again recently. He put out a book about uh, jazz harmony and the bass, and just like the dangers of playing things that are too hip and disrupting the harmony versus really knowing the harmony. I mean, it's amazing because you think for the we're playing roots so often, but it's this subtle, complex, ever shifting art form. It's a totally fascinating world.
It still blows my mind, like how much difference it makes if we play the third on the downbeat, for example, in the harmony. Such an open sound, right?
Mhm.
I would really like to study that book. You have to send me afterwards
I
the name
will.
of.
I will. Yeah, no, it's great. It's really interesting, and I find it. I'm mostly a classical player, kind of like uh, not. I'm not a very advanced jazz player, but I find it totally interesting, and I teach some younger students jazz, and so I'm always thinking about that and like how to really approach even a rhythm changes bass line, or a B flat blues bass line, or a bass line over autumn leaves. I mean, it's amazing how even some of our more simple structures, it's just never ending, limitless possibilities what we can do.
Yes, and never ending practice as well, unfortunately.
and never ending practice. Well, so how do you? So I can tell just looking through what you're up to. You're on the road quite a bit. How do you integrate practice? Because I mean, obviously, you're continuing to practice and compose, and you're putting out, your fourth album and all these other collaborative projects. How do you fit in practicing into your probably fragmented life? How does that work for you?
Right. So I have it's very sparse. I have a 1 hour practice, what do you call it, schedule,
Mm-hmm.
practice routine I do every day. And then besides that, I I found ways to practice without my instrument, because I had a few years where I was on the road constantly, and I had to find way to practice. I have to find way to improve my musicality, even though I was sitting in an airplane or in a train, stuff like that. So I worked out some techniques how or what to work on when I couldn't touch my instrument.
Mm-hmm.
So the 1 hour I spent with my instrument, like that's the minimum, and I have to do it. That's technique. And then musical thoughts could be like practicing. I have lots of ways of practicing rhythm. For example, I can do that without my instrument. And harmony, like to figure out harmonic progressions and stuff like that. I do that without my instrument.
Okay. I would love to break like because I too have an hour routine that I do, but I know everybody's is different. What is in that hour routine? What do you do in terms of technical exercises, or I'd love to know.
Okay, so for example, today, just to take an example, I did 20 minutes of. I'm studying books. I try to make it through a book in like a month, for example, as like a study book. Right now, I'm working on the second book of Jerry Bergonzi. He's a tenor player,
Mm-hmm.
and he has this approach with scales, different scales on chords where they don't belong, like how to play outside, for example,
Sure.
outside harmony. So right now I'm working on that. Then I do that for 20 minutes, and then I do the same thing on the electric bass for 10 minutes.
Do you play a lot of electric bass these days?
Man, nothing. If I want an electric bass gig, I have to set it up myself.
Okay.
Because I really like playing, but during my years in Berlin, where I played a lot of gigs and tours, I only played double bass because I was into this jazz scene. So I think now people see me as a double bass player.
Yeah.
And then I never get called for electric gigs, but I love it. So I have to take care of that one myself. But I do practice it. I want to keep in shape.
Yeah. Yeah. So at this time away from the base, and I think about this all the time because, like you, I travel a lot, and tomorrow I'm going to be in an airport for probably 3 hours, and so I'm trying to find ways to improve. And again, yeah, I need to connect you with Danny Zeman. I'll bet you two would have a great conversation because we were talking about thinking about improving, just as kind of like improving your musicianship in general, and that could be with the bass in hand, that could be on a plane, thinking through a rhythm or harmony or what have you, or some other aspect of your musicianship. But we can constantly be improving, and some of the time it's with our bass in hand. What does that, so that time without the bass, like you were mentioning, going through rhythm, what are some of those regular things that you do to keep getting better away from the bass?
Yes. Well, last year I published an ebook called The Rhythm Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've been working on a lot, trying to figure out how polypulses sound.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the mathematics behind polypulses, and that's something I practice daily, all the time. Whenever I'm in some kind of transport, I practice polypulses, because that really sharpens my subdivisions a lot, like being able to hear 3 and 5 at the same time, or even 4, 5, and 6 at the same time. That's actually my main focus, and it's been for years, because I like the notes of the bass, but if in my kind of music, in the jazz world, if the rhythm isn't swinging or tight, the notes doesn't really matter. So that's my main focus, the rhythm. And also I have different exercises for playing over bar lines and stuff like that I can do easily without the instrument.
I have a friend named Donovan Stokes, I don't even know how to describe him musically, but some combination of maybe a classical player, maybe a heavy metal bassist, and, also,
Right.
but he has started to get, but he writes a lot, and he started to get into writing every single day a little bit. And I'm totally fascinated by what people do. Like, how do you fit in composing? Is it kind of sporadic, or do you work on it every day, or do you go through periods? How does the composition process work for you?
I would love to say that I do it every day, but I don't, because I think they're more like I like to have a deadline and then work on it, because I kind of feel like my ears and my creativity kind of needs to be in the zone. So I set up deadlines. That could be recordings or tours, and then I practice a little less those weeks, but I write a lot more, and I like having stuff to work on that I know are gonna be fulfilled, or even recorded and released. Or I try to imagine the whole process. I try to imagine the band I'm writing for while I'm writing. I think that's a very romantic thought about writing music every day, but I have a daughter, she's 6 months old. I have a teaching job. I'm practicing my bass. So finding an hour or two to compose every day is just not possible for me. So I try to schedule it so I actually get it done.
When I was recently chatting with Gary and Eric of Upton Bass, I asked them, how did they do what they do? How do they build their presence and be so top of mind among bassists around the world? Here's what they said.
My ego doesn't want to say this, right? And Eric's won't like it either. But because of the timing, we couldn't do again what we've done.
Yeah. And what they have done is absolutely extraordinary. From their beginnings as an accessories shop online to now making over 120 basses a year. They're coming up, as I record this, on 1,700 basses. They've got an army of satisfied customers who bought multiple basses. They're just really doing great things. They do great work and stand behind their products. Check them out at uptonbass.com. And thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, guys. This episode is brought to you by the Bass Violin Shop, which opened in 2001 as a small double bass workshop in Greensboro, North Carolina. Today, they're staffed by 3 full-time, highly skilled bass luthiers, and they specialize in double bass sales, rentals, setup, restoration, and repair. For nearly 20 years, they have satisfied thousands of clients by offering quality instruments, knowledgeable service, reliable repairs, and superior restorations at affordable prices. They proudly offer the largest variety of fine basses and bows in the Southeast. You can find something at every price point by makers such as Thomas Martin, Bill Lakeberg, Romano Solano, Lemur Music, all Shen models, K, Epiphone, and bows by Louis Morizot, Fuchs, Nürnbergo, Arcos Brazil, and others. For more information and current inventory, visit their website at bassviolinshop.com and be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. This episode is brought to you by the A440 Violin Shop. It's located just down the street from Wrigley Field in beautiful Chicago on the north side, just off the Brown Line. I have been going there my entire adult life, and they have been fantastic, both for repairs. I've had cracks repaired, I've had seams glued, I've had all sorts of students go to A440 to get instruments, to get bows. They're available with a smile, do wonderful work, and definitely check them out if you are in the Midwest. A440violinshop.com, and thanks for sponsoring the podcast. How often how often are you on the road? I'm sure it varies month to month, but I see you're doing a lot of traveling. Is it busier now that you just released this album, or what does a given month or maybe even a given year look like for you in terms of time on the road?
It used to be around 100 to 120 days a year. But right now, after I got the teaching position and my baby girl, I scale it down to 60 gigs a year abroad. And then, I don't know, maybe 100 in Denmark.
Okay, that's still a lot.
It's a lot, but you know, a jazz bass player is like, it's rare.
Yeah.
Compared to other instruments, so we're needed. So it's easier for us to find jobs. But because I want to see my kid grow up, I made this agreement with my girlfriend that 5 gigs a month or 60 a year. It's like the maximum, and then we can make things work.
Okay. Yeah, my wife and I need to come up with something like that, because I have definitely had some months where it's like, okay, this is officially too much time on the road. You know, I reckon it's like over 50% of the time or something like that.
Yes. I mean, the good thing now is that most of the stuff I do is my stuff. It's my bands, so I can kind of schedule it. I guess being a classical player, you get a contract and you have to be there for 30 days, for example, if you do a show somewhere with a symphony.
Yeah, I think it's much more challenging career-wise to carve out your own terms. You know, I think that's part of one of the beautiful things about what you do, or what people in your position do, is if you are smart about the way you approach your career and you build out a lot of your personal projects, like you've obviously done, you really do have a lot of control over creating your own time. You're still going to be on the road. I think that's just sort of the life of a creative artist, especially someone in the jazz world. But you can have some more control over when and how much.
Yes, definitely. I think I kind of found my place now. I really like, but I did live a super stressful life. Like I didn't say no to anything, and I just toured all the time, and that made me a better bass player. But I do prefer what I'm doing now, that I can say no to things and I can do better tours, better conditions, and I also have time to practice. That's something I really missed a lot. Like the time to dig into my instrument.
Yeah. It's really hard if you're on the road all the time and your bass is in transit all the time. And even though you're playing on the bandstand, you know, that's a very different thing from that personal time, that, you know, meditative, that time to just really be in the woodshed and the creative space. It's beautiful.
And you tell yourself that I'm going to practice at the hotel room tomorrow, or I can play electric bass in the train, but it's not going to happen. Because then the band wants to go for coffee or something like that. So all these things that interfere with your like meditative state of practicing, right?
Yeah, it's really hard on the road. I have all these routines that I like to do at home, you know, when I'm in my space, but I just have like a different standard for myself on the road. Though I do try to stay healthy on the road. I mean, these are probably the years you were in Berlin or you were in Copenhagen, right? Like how did you keep from, because I mean, that life can be a grind, that many days on the road. What did you do to keep balanced or healthy on the road? Like, did you work out, or did you try to get away from the band every now and again, or what did you do to stay sane?
Well,
or did you
stay sane when I've always struggled, not health-wise, never any danger, but I've always been a bit overweight, for example, and I tried to take care of that. And also on the road, it's super difficult. Mm-hmm. It's super duper. I mean, then you go out for some beers, or the venue serves you food and stuff. You really have to be careful. Mm-hmm. But I have this routine which is very, very simple, and people may not agree, but it works for me. Like I walk 10,000 steps a day, no matter what, and I do 100 push-ups.
That's great.
I have two things I do every day: that, and then practice for 1 hour at least.
That's a beautiful routine. There's a simplicity to that too, right? Those are easily achievable because no matter where you are, no matter what conditions, you can get down and do push-ups, and you can walk, even if it's inside a hotel because it's a blizzard out. You can do those two things. I might experiment with that this next coming trip, because I struggle. You know, I go to the gym every day when I'm here in town. We have a gym in our condo building, but then I'm out on the road, and it's like, if I can't do my whole thing, am I going to do it at all? But that's a beautiful routine, actually. I love that.
I mean, it works for me because if it gets too complicated, I'm not going to do it at all. Mm-hmm. Right? So I just figured out over the years and through all the tours that I need to keep it super, super simple. And it works. Yeah. It's great.
You, thinking about touring and that bass travel, do you take your own bass everywhere? Do you borrow where you go?
I invested. Oh man,
it's a big topic.
So I used to borrow basses, but I played in a trio in France that got very popular. So we started playing theaters and bigger stages, and then I thought, okay, I need a good bass for this. I need to always have beautiful sound. So I invested in a bass. I found this bass from the 19th century, the Tyrol, like Austria, Italy, and it's smaller. It's like a 5/8 body.
Yeah.
And then we put a 3/4 neck on it, and made it with a detachable neck, and with a hard case, so it would go below 23 kilos. I don't know much that is in pounds, but it's the limit for the airlines.
Yeah.
So you don't have to pay overweight, and that actually works. So I do have a bass that I can bring with me, without extra costs, and it's great and it sounds good. But I mean, if you go on tour and you play 3 gigs, for example, this weekend I'm going to Poland. I have 2 concerts and a masterclass. Is it worth bringing the bass for that little? I have 4 flights, right? Yeah. I mean, because if you have a lot of flights, then the waiting time in the airport, the extra waiting time, it just adds up.
Yeah.
It's gonna be like 5 or 6 extra hours waiting for my bass, because that always comes last because it's bulky baggage.
That's a tough balance to figure out for sure, especially for a trip. Yeah, because like I know that feeling. I'm hesitant to even check any bag if I have to, because it adds, just like you're saying, it adds time at the beginning, adds even more time at the end. It's got to be tough. I totally understand wanting to have a bass that's yours that you can consistently play on the road, though. Even because even if maybe your preferred instruments at home, just having something, because I think especially in an improvisatory art form, like having to think about where the notes are on that bass, to me it seems like that would like knock you out of that creative space, and all of a sudden you're thinking like, where's the A up in some position, where I or the string heights a little bit to this or that, or I mean, those are the sort of things that for me it seems like that would really interfere with me really being in the moment.
Yes, I think the string height is an issue for sure. But you never know, right? Intonation wise and string length, it's annoying, of course, but I do feel that if I just show up to soundcheck half an hour before the other guys, I can kind of get to know the bass.
Yeah.
Kind of. And also, some people may not like this, but I don't think it's as crucial for us bass players, jazz bass players, as it is for classical players. Pitch. Of course, everything should be in pitch, but it's just it's more obvious when playing with the bow. So I think if I was to play bow all the time, I would bring my own bass, because I need to know like the physical what do you call it? Like how exactly where my notes are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the fingerboard mapping, like where everything. Yeah.
And I read this interview with Dave Holland once, and someone asked me how he could be so much in tune, and he said that he's not. He just learned to hear it faster than everyone else. Like he corrected, right? And I think that's true for a lot of jazz bass players. So I mean, it's not that obvious if we are slightly out of tune, and also I think our ears are more sensitive than the rest of like everyone else who doesn't play the bass. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and I love that description from Dave Holland. That's and I think we do that. I think we do that with the bow too. But I think you're right. It does sort of like, it like puts a magnifying glass on the pitch a little bit, having that. And thinking, I'm always interested when people that play primarily jazz, how much they use the bow in terms of practice, even if they're playing pizzicato mostly. Like, do you practice with the bow regularly, or is that a part of your daily routine, or occasionally?
It's part of my daily routine. Right now I'm working on the Simandl. He made this book of 30 etudes.
Oh yeah.
And it's fun and it's easy. Again, it's super simple to go through them. There's even someone who made like playback stuff. You can use on YouTube, and it takes me 4 or 5 minutes per etude, and yeah, it's just easy and fun and nice, and it's good for my pitch.
It's one of my favorite books to go through, and I didn't realize that someone put together a YouTube play-along. I'm going to have to start doing that. Another one of my favorites are the Sturm etudes. There are 110 etudes, and they're in 2 volumes, and they're really, really I find them musically enjoyable. They're never insanely hard. I mean, each one has their challenges, but some of them are based off of a piece, like Beethoven Fifth Symphony or Mendelssohn Fourth Symphony or something like that. But I find them really useful for technique. I try to do one a day. I've been doing that I'm on number 56. So I think I've missed some days, but most days I've gotten one in. So
yeah. That's nice.
Oh yeah, it's great. Well, now that you're teaching more, and you're teaching at the conservatory, what age level is that? Is that teenagers into their 20s, or is it like 18 to 25, or what age students are those?
So what we have is like a master's program and a bachelor's program. So I guess it's from 18 and then up.
Okay.
I mean, you can apply when you're 50 here in Denmark, but our students range from 18 to 30, I guess.
Okay. What's that experience been like for you? And then I'd love to know, and people listening will love to know too, like what are you doing with those students in terms of, are you having them transcribe a lot? Are you teaching them specific technique exercises, or like how do you take them into the world of bass, technically and musically?
Right. Well, first off, I didn't really know what to expect when they offered me the position. I was actually worried that I was going to move back home to Aalborg and then teach, not have time to play, and I would actually become a worse bass player than I was. But it's been amazing. I became such a better musician after I started working with these young students, because I really have to evaluate my own playing and become better all the time, and work on material for them. So I can, like, teaching on a high level is just a gold mine for a musician, that's for sure. But I'm spending a lot of time preparing my lessons for them, so they all have individual programs for wherever they are in their musical life. So I have a half-time position, but it kind of feels like a full-time position.
Sure.
For now, I only been there for 2 years, so maybe I have more material once I go to my 6th or 7th year. Yeah. And also, I think it's interesting. But we work on technique. Every time I show them exercises, but I don't want to spend too much time on the class to run through exercises. I think it's something they should do at home. And then we listen to music. I bring them a piece of music I think they should listen to every time. And then I try to find approaches to music, like to improvisation, for example. Right now, I told you I'm working on this Bergonzi method, and I'm always showing them what I'm working on also, so we can do it together maybe. And yeah, so my goal with the teaching is to not play too much during the lesson, maybe more talk about music and bass, but give them stuff that they can play at home, because I think that's where they should play. I don't need them to sit in front of me and play music. I don't need to evaluate them every time they come to my class. I just need to push them further.
This episode is brought to you by D'Addario Strings. Our friends at D'Addario want to help listeners change their strings safely and efficiently, and they have a few tricks to help you achieve that. Here's a great tip. Change your strings 2 at a time, removing them from the inside out, then replacing them from the outside in allows for easy access to the lower pegs, ensuring strings lay neatly in the peg box. Learn more at orchestral.daddario.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. This episode is brought to you by Steve Swan String Bass. Steve has been active in the bass world and also the guitar world for years. Here's a bit from our live podcast taping with Steve on how he got into that business.
Guitars and basses.
Guitars and basses.
Okay, how did that happen?
They're both helper instruments. I've always played the rhythm guitar, quite often with bass lines moving, either in swing style, jazz style, or country style. Bass is the same thing, supporting the band, the group of people you're playing with. So I've always felt like I was a support person.
I love how Steve describes being a support person, and he is certainly that for the bass community here on the West Coast, here in the San Francisco Bay Area. His shop is located just south of San Francisco, and he has a large retail showroom with about 70 basses on display. And these basses are professional top-of-the-line basses. These basses are student-level basses and everything in between. They're beautifully set up. So if you're looking for a bass or you know someone who is, be sure to check out Steve at steveswanstringbass.com. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, Steve. It's so interesting. That's something that I think that people who teach predominantly jazz players, I think, really do well at. I think because I do a fair amount of teaching myself, but mostly classical students, and I think a lot of my lessons end up being more like play, evaluate. And I think sometimes I miss the bigger picture, conceptual, like the things that might actually develop their musicianship long term more. It's I had a job in teaching bass in Chicago at DePaul University, and I taught all the jazz students studied with me for 2 years, and they studied with the jazz teacher for 2 years. That's a common model here in the States, And I always struggled with what am I offering these students? Because I was seen as the quote unquote technique teacher, right? And so I always tried to figure out what does that mean? Where should I try to take them? And it was always interesting. Like you were saying, it was very individualized for every student. But I learned so much, and I became such a better musician in that kind of role.
Yeah, but also I think it's funny that so everyone who studies here in Denmark, they either study classical or they study jazz, and most of the bass players that I know, once we, and myself included, once we finish our 5-year jazz study, then we start playing classical at home. Then we pick up the bow. Then we learn how to phrase the scales so they sound good and stuff like that. So I think it's a really good idea. I wish that my students could have a classical teacher just for 1 year or on the side while they study with me as well. That would be amazing, because phrasing and pitch and like all the what do you call it, like smaller stuff, like zoomed in stuff, is something that we lack as jazz bass players, because most of the time we have this supportive role in the music. We are behind someone, and most of the time it just goes boom, 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 boom. So what we're working on is more concepts, for example, right? How to play with other people. And I think a lot of young students should have a closer look on their instruments, like zoom in and see how it really should sound.
And that's a good time to do it, too. That's a beautiful time of life. You can learn anything at any point. I'm still learning to these days, but boy, those were really formative years. If I graphed out my progress, that like late teens into the early mid-20s up to 30, I made some serious strides then. And the other thing I would always struggle with, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I'm sure you've got plenty, is like a career in music. I'm talking to these young people and they're jazz player, but they're interested in classical too. And they're trying to figure out what to do. And and you've obviously found great success and you had this great journey and then studying in New York and then working with a lot of other people on their projects and now all of your projects and the mixture you have and the teaching. So I think anybody would consider your career something to aspire towards. So like, what do you, it's a very long way of just asking, like, what do you tell these young people that you work with in terms of developing their career? Just any advice you share with these people. I'm sure anybody listening to this would appreciate.
Yeah.
Big question. Sorry.
No, it's good. I mean, I could, when I was 24, 25, I met a piano player who lived in New York, and he kind of became my mentor. I don't know if he knows that, but I really looked up to him, and now he's one of my colleagues at the school. And he told me back then that I should give it my all until I'm 35. Mm-hmm. Like everything. Yes to all the gigs, practice like hell, and just go for it. And I did that, and I always had that in mind. That one conversation we had, some sushi place on Manhattan somewhere. But that really helped me, and that helped me through the hard times as well. Because I struggled a lot when I was in Berlin, because I thought when I moved there, I thought I was the best bass player in the world, because I came from Aalborg. And here were 200,000 people. That means, like, what, 3 bass players back then, before the conservatory was really up. So, and then in Berlin, I realized that, hey, I'm not the best bass player. Not at all. I went to a jam session the first night, and I got so depressed. I got lost in Blue Bossa after 3 choruses, and people could really play. So, and then I remembered his words that you just have to go for it until you're 35. And if it doesn't work when you're 35, then do something else. But that's a good limit, because, well, I'm 34 now, and it worked out. I have a good life now. So, but one of the things that I really benefit from in my career is to write my own music, so I can be in charge. I don't have to wait for other people to do stuff for me. I can just go for it. And I think that's very important. I think that's how you get things done. And then I just have this one general rule that the music is always number one. That the music always has to be good, in my opinion. Doesn't really matter what other people think. But I think if I think that my product is good, and I'm in charge of my product, I mean, then you just go for it.
Right. Yep.
But it does take some hard years. I mean, you have to look inwards sometimes and just maybe acknowledge that you have to practice more. For example, it was really, really a good thing for me to move to Berlin, because I thought I was so good. But if I had stayed in Aalborg, I wouldn't have played today, because like people would have like outrun me bass playing wise. So it's really good for me to get my ass kicked. Those 3 years in Berlin.
It's such, I think that's such a valuable, that go for it, go all in until you're 35. I love that, because, you hear, at least in the circles I run in, you hear 2 very different advices a lot of the time. One is try everything and kind of like, and I think there's value to that. You need to be good at all these different skills, and that's obviously true. But if you hedge your bets too much and you don't really go for something, you never know what you're actually going to be able to achieve. So I think that there's some value in really just like, rather than, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna take this part-time job, and I'm gonna do this, to really try to like live, eat rice and beans or peanut butter and jelly, and go to everything and say yes to everything like you did. And what's the worst that's going to happen is you're going to be poor for a few years. But what much more likely happens is I think the way your career is developed, and that's such a key point. The starting to write your own music. That's something a bass player here in California, Miles Mosley, super interesting guy. He's kind of like a cross between Jimi Hendrix and John Clayton. I don't know, but like he talks about that, and he's played on Kendrick Lamar's albums, and he's played on all sorts of big projects. But he said like he got advice early on, develop your own thing, write your own music. And so he's had a lot of success in film writing for films and doing all this. And it enables him to have, like what you've got, more control over your life. So you're not always a sideman for everybody. And that's not bad, but the possibilities to really shape your destiny the way you want it, I think, are greater. And speaking of that, so the new album, am I pronouncing it correctly? Tet? Like tête-à-tête? Is that, am I, no? Off? Okay.
Well, it's not a word, but it's TÉTÉ. And
TÉTÉ. Okay.
it's what I called myself as a baby before I could speak.
I like it. It's good. So, so this just came out recently. Talk about the album, the band. Just tell me a little about this new project. I've listened to the whole thing. I was on the bus yesterday, coming back from teaching, and I was digging it. You play some tasty bass lines, man. It's great, and great solos, and it's a really nice release. So, just tell me about the new album.
Thanks. Yeah, okay. So it's my fourth album, and the three first albums are kind of dark and gloomy because I went, like, my mom was very sick for 8 or 9 years, and that showed in my music. And then she died, and she told me before she died that it's important that I start to have some fun. And I wanted to put that into music, and then I ended up making a whole album with that thought in mind. And that's why I called it TÉTÉ, because that was my baby name. So I wanted to find back to that childish approach to it. And I called musicians that I played with on different tours all over the world, where I could really let myself loose in the music and just trust them 100%. And that was such fun. We went on tour for 2 weeks, and then we went into the studio for 1 day. And it worked out nicely. So there's a guitar player I played a lot with. He's half Congolese and half Polish, and lives in Copenhagen. His name is Brian Masaka. He's an amazing jazz guitar player, but he also does all these. He has this alter ego called Mulate, where he does beats and stuff.
Cool.
And that's like his main project, and then he plays jazz guitar on the side. And he just has this, his rhythm is just, he flows on top of the rhythm, and it's so nice. He can go in and out of everything. And my music is very complicated rhythmically, but to him it doesn't really matter, and that's so nice to have him in the band. And then there's a French piano player he lives in Paris, Gauthier Toux. I played in his trio for 5 years, and so we know each other in and out. It's very nice to have him there. Oh, sorry, I just have to change room. 2 seconds.
No problem.
Family's coming home. Should I start over?
No, yeah, just start off where you fit. That's okay. I'll make an edit. It's no problem.
Okay. So there's this French piano player, and we've been playing together for 5 years. And then I went on tour in South America with a band called the World Citizen Band, which is this band scattered from all over the world. And we went to Costa Rica 1 year, and the drummer is from Costa Rica, but he teaches at, what's that called? If it's called FIU in Miami.
Oh yeah, Florida International University, I think. Yeah, FIU. Yeah.
He's the drum professor there, Rodolfo Zuniga, and I flew him over, and he's one of my really good friends, and he's an amazing drummer. The last guy was Uri Govic. He's an Israeli saxophone player living in New York, and we met in Ecuador on a tour once, also in this band. So it's scattered from different places, but I flew them in. Then we had 2 days rehearsal and went on tour for 2 weeks, and then in the studio, and it was beautiful. It's nice.
Well, it's great. It's my condolences for your mother. But it's a beautiful album, and very just uplifting and a lot of fun. The band sounds great, and it's great to chat. I usually round out these with one question, something along the lines of, what advice would you give young Kenneth? Like, if you went back to, how old were you when you went to New York for the first time?
20. 2, I guess.
Okay, so like if you just go back and talk, so like a little over a decade ago, go back and talk to 22-year-old Kenneth and give him some advice.
It's so funny you would ask me that question, because I just saw this quote that really that I really liked. I saw this quote that said, "Be whoever you needed when you were younger."
I like
it's beautiful.
That. Yeah, I like that.
I think one thing I found out that is super important if you want to have a career in music is to have consistency in what you do. I think that's number one, like to become to just keep going and keep improving, but stay on track, do what you do, and then always be curious about other people. In the beginning I was not curious at all. I just wanted to play jazz, and I saw that as a finer art. But as I grew older and hopefully wiser, I found out that all the gems are hidden in all kinds of music. And I think you always need to be on the lookout for new stuff that can improve your own music. So my advice would be to have an open mind, but to stay on track.
I appreciate it, man. It's KennethKnudsen.net, and we'll link up to your social, your Facebook musician page and Instagram and everything. And it's great talking to you. I dig what you do, and the door is always open. Anytime you got a new project, let me know and we can hop on FaceTime and do a quick episode about it. This isn't a one and done deal. So I like having people back multiple times. I've had people back 3 or 4 times at least. So just keep in touch.
Man, thank you so much.
Kenneth, thank you so much for chatting. And folks, you can learn more at his website, KennethKnudsen.net. Great guy. The first of many conversations, I hope. And it's just so fun for me to have chats like this. Here I am at my place in San Francisco, Kenneth's in Denmark, and traveling all over the world. And I just feel so privileged to be able to sit down and chat with interesting artists like Kenneth. So thank you for what you do, Kenneth. And thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. There are many things you could be listening to right now, and I'm totally honored that you're listening to this episode, and that if you're at this point, whoa, we finished chatting with Kenneth and you're still listening to my voice. So that's a major honor. I really appreciate you taking the time and following along. And if you ever want to reach out, feedback@contrabassconversations.com will put you in touch with me. And I love hearing from people that listen to the show. Contrabass Conversations is produced by a great team. They consist of Steve Hinchy, Michael Cooper, Trevor Jones, and Mitch Mooring. They handle all sorts of background jobs. There's so much that goes into a podcast. You can't even believe it. And thank you to Krista Copper for cataloging and archive everything we talk about. Mitch Mooring, by the way, is making beautiful basses in the Dallas area. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. And I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.